Brant Vale divorced his wife in front of the woman he wanted to marry, not in court, not in private, but inside the Vale family estate, while his mother watched with satisfaction and his mistress sat close enough to hear Della's heart break. Della Vale, 34-year-old wife of Brant, stood near the fireplace with her coat still on, because no one had even asked her to sit. Brant Vale, 37-year-old heir and acting president of Vale & Sons Manufacturing, held a sealed divorce packet in one hand. Nora Vale, 64-year-old mother of Brant, and the woman who treated the Vale name like a crown, stood behind him like the real person giving orders. Mary's Venn, 32-year-old wealthy socialite and investor's niece Nora had chosen for her son, smiled like the house already belonged to her. Brant swallowed once, then said, "I'm ending this marriage." Della's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why?" Before Brant could answer, Nora stepped forward. "Because I told him to stop wasting his life," she said. "This family needs a woman with money, influence, and status. Mary's can give him what you never could." Della looked at Brant. "Is that what you believe?" Brant looked away. Then he said, "Mother is right." That was the moment Della understood he had not only betrayed her with Mary's. He had handed his marriage to his mother and let her throw it away. Mary's placed a diamond bracelet on the table and said, "You should leave with dignity. Brant is choosing his future." Della did not scream, she did not beg. She only took the divorce packet from Brant's hand, because Brant did not know the truth. He did not know Della was the hidden controlling owner of Heartbridge Capital through the Warren Ray Family Trust. He did not know Heartbridge was the company already in final talks to buy and stabilize Vale & Sons. He did not know the poor wife his mother despised had been quietly protecting his family business for months through lawyers, auditors, and a confidential board process. He thought the divorce made him free, but it only removed him from the last protection he had. 2 days later, after Brant signed a separation agreement that cut him off from any claim to Della's trust-held assets, he walked into the board meeting ready to announce his future with Mary's. Then Della walked in and said, "Before you thank your new investors, you should know who owns them. Some betrayals do not destroy the quiet person immediately. They wake up the part of them that was patient, powerful, and waiting for the right room to reveal the truth." Stay with this story until the end, because the woman they pushed out of the marriage is the same woman holding the papers that can take away his company, his mistress, and the family name his mother worshipped. If you love stories where betrayal meets consequence, subscribe now. And before we begin, comment "Justice" if you believe the person who stayed loyal should never be mistaken for weak. The machine screamed before anyone saw the danger. A sharp metal cry ripped through the east side of Vale & Sons Manufacturing, making workers jump back from the production line. A red warning light flashed above the old press. Steam hissed from one cracked pressure valve. For 3 seconds, everyone froze, because every person on that floor knew what a full mechanical failure could cost. Then Della Vale moved. Della, 34, Brant Vale's wife, and the woman most workers treated like quiet family, stepped across the yellow safety line and raised one hand. "Shut it down, now." A worker hit the emergency stop. The machine coughed once, shook hard enough to rattle bolts loose, then died. Only then did the floor breathe again. Della stood in the middle of the factory in a plain gray coat, holding a clipboard that did not belong to any official department. Her dark hair was tied back. There was no diamond necklace, no loud designer bag, no sign that she was secretly the controlling owner of Heartbridge Capital, the private investment company preparing to buy this failing factory through the Warren Ray Family Trust, named after her late father. To everyone here, she was just Brant's wife, but she knew the machines, she knew the debt, she knew the payroll dates. She knew which suppliers had stopped extending credit, which safety repairs had been delayed, which workers had sick spouses, which workers had children in college, and which old equipment could not survive another month without serious repair. She knew because for months she had watched the company from 2 sides. As Brant's wife, she saw what he hid badly. As Heartbridge's owner, she received the confidential due diligence reports that Brant was too proud to read carefully. Tessa Rowe, 62, a line worker who had spent 28 years at Vale & Sons and whose family depended on her paycheck, pressed one hand to her chest. That could have taken the whole line down. Della looked at the dead machine. "But it didn't." Tessa gave her a tired smile. "My boy got that interview, by the way, the one at Caro Parts." Della's face softened. "He earned it." She did not mention the call she had made 2 weeks earlier. She did not mention the quiet recommendation sent through one of Hearthbridge's supplier contacts. That was how Della helped people, softly, privately, without turning kindness into performance. Lowell Pike, 59, the longtime operations manager at Vale & Sons, and one of the few people who cared more about the workers than the family name, hurried toward her with grease on his sleeve and worry in his eyes. "The East Press is done begging," Lowell said. "If it fails during the Caro order, we lose the contract." Della already knew. She had read the same warning in a confidential acquisition report at midnight. The East Press, the payroll shortage, the supplier liens, the insurance delay, the quiet fear among middle managers, she knew all of it. But she could not say that. Not yet. The Vale board had opened a confidential sale process after the bank threatened to freeze its credit line. Hearthbridge had submitted the strongest rescue offer, but because Della was married to Brandt, her attorneys had insisted on a clean process. Independent directors had to review the bid. Company counsel had to verify conflict disclosures. The beneficial owner of Hearthbridge would be revealed formally before final approval, not through gossip, panic, or a fight inside Brandt's office. So Della asked like a concerned wife, how long before it fails completely? Lowell looked toward the office windows above the floor. The blinds were closed. Depends if anyone upstairs is ready to hear the truth. Della followed his eyes. Behind those blinds was Brandt Vale, 37, her husband and the heir of Vale & Sons Manufacturing, a man crushed between pride and panic. He had inherited the company from his father, but not the strength to admit it was drowning. Lowell lowered his voice. "You always ask the questions Brandt should ask." Della did not answer. That sentence hurt because it was true. Inside Brandt's office, his voice was already rising. Della heard pieces of the argument through the glass before she entered. "You'll get paid when we stabilize cash flow," Brandt snapped into the phone. "No, you don't get to threaten my family's company." He slammed the receiver down, then quickly covered a stack of papers when he saw Della. She glanced at his hand. Under the folder, she saw the edge of an overdue payroll notice. Beside it sat a financing proposal stamped Venbridge Holdings. She kept her face calm. "How bad is it?" she asked. Brandt forced a laugh, but his eyes were tired. "It's business, Della, you wouldn't understand." The words landed quietly, but they cut deep. For a moment, Della saw another version of him. A younger Brandt standing outside the factory after his father's funeral, rain on his suit, fear in his voice. Back then he had held her hand and said he only wanted to protect what his father built. Now he was hiding failure under arrogance. Della looked at the covered papers. "If there's a financing offer, you should let independent counsel review every default clause before you sign anything." Brandt's jaw tightened. "You heard one phone call and suddenly you're an expert?" "No," she said. "I heard fear." His face changed. For 1 second, shame almost reached him, then pride closed the door. "My mother is bringing people who can actually help," he said. "Please don't make this harder." Della's phone buzzed before she could reply. The screen showed Elias Fenn, 48, her attorney and the only man outside her private board who knew both sides of her life. Della Vale, discarded wife, and Della Ray Vale, controlling owner of Hearthbridge Capital. She stepped into the hallway. Elias spoke in a low voice. "The acquisition team wants your final approval to continue toward closing. The independent committee has the offer. Company counsel has the trust structure. If Hearthbridge buys Vale & Sons before the Venn financing closes, you can save the workers and absorb the debt cleanly." Della looked through the glass at Brandt. He was standing alone now, rubbing his forehead like a man trying not to fall apart. "Not yet," she said. "The committee still has to finish its conflict review. If Brandt learns too early, he'll either block it out of pride or run straight to Nora." Elias paused. "Della, you are trying to save a man who does not know you are the one holding the rope." Her throat tightened. A memory rose without warning. She was 16 again, walking beside her father, Warren Ray, through one of his factories. Warren Ray had been a self-made industrial investor who bought broken plants and rebuilt them without erasing the workers who made them valuable. He had pointed to the people on the floor, not the sign outside, and told her, "Never fall in love with a name on a building. Fall in love with how people are treated inside it." That lesson had followed her into marriage. "I married Brandt before the company started falling," Della whispered. "I am not going to let 200 families fall with him." "Then let Orrin begin the deeper review," Elias said. Orrin Hale, 41, a private investigator who worked with Elias on corporate fraud, hidden conflicts, and predatory financing patterns, had been waiting for permission to examine Venbridge Holdings. Della closed her eyes. "Start quietly," I want documents, not rumors. When she returned to the factory floor, the workers were still watching the dead machine. Brandt stayed hidden behind his blinds. Della left through the front entrance a few minutes later, her clipboard held tight against her coat. That was when a black car pulled up. Nora Vale, 64, Brandt's controlling mother and the woman who guarded the Vale name like a weapon, stepped out first. She was not alone. A younger woman in a cream coat stepped out beside her, smiling at the factory sign as if she could already see her name shining there. Nora kissed the woman's cheek and said, "Maurice, darling, this place just needs the right woman beside my son." Della stopped walking. Above them, Brandt opened his office blinds. For the first time that morning, he did not look ashamed of the company. He looked impressed, and Della felt the first quiet crack in the life she had been trying so hard to save. "Do not sign anything until I see it." Della's voice cut across the factory hallway before she even reached the executive dining room. Inside, Brandt stood at the long table with a pen already in his hand. Nora sat beside him, calm as stone. Across from them, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit had opened a leather folder filled with loan papers. Brandt looked up, embarrassed and angry. "Della, this is not the time." "It is exactly the time," she said, stepping into the room. The air changed the moment she entered. There were 6 chairs around the table, but only one was empty, pushed near the wall as if someone had placed it there for a person expected to listen, not speak. Nora's smile was thin. "Della, you can sit there. Brandt needs to be near the actual decision-makers." Della looked at the chair, then at Brandt. He said nothing. That silence hurt more than Nora's words. Only that morning, Lowell had warned Della that outside investors were touring the plant. She had not been invited as Brandt's wife. She had discovered the meeting the way strangers discover secrets, by accident. Standing beside Nora was the young woman from the black car. Maurice Venn, 32, was Grant Venn's niece, and the polished woman Nora had begun placing near Brandt as if she were already part of the family. Her wealth was the kind people believed before they verified it. Society photos, charity boards, borrowed jewels, family real estate, and a last name that opened doors. She wore a cream silk blouse, pearl earrings, and the kind of smile that made every insult sound like good manners. The man with the folder was Grant Venn, 58, head of Venbridge Holdings and Maurice's uncle. He carried himself like a rescuer, but his eyes moved around the room like a man pricing equipment before an auction. Maurice looked Della up and down. "You're very calm for someone whose husband's family company is in crisis." Della sat slowly in the chair near the wall. "Panic does not pay invoices." Maurice smiled, but her eyes sharpened. For the first time, she understood that Della was not as simple as Nora had promised. Grant cleared his throat and turned the papers toward Brandt. "As I was saying, Venbridge can offer immediate relief, enough to quiet your suppliers, cover urgent repairs, and keep payroll stable until the acquisition conversation becomes clearer." The word relief sounded kind. The terms on the page were not. Della saw the danger before Brandt did. The interest rate was heavy. The repayment window was narrow. The security package was aggressive. If Vale and Sons missed even one major payment, Venbridge could claim control over key assets, including equipment, receivables, and production contracts. It was not rescue, it was a hook. Brandt leaned forward, hungry for any answer that did not make him feel like a failure. "This could buy us time," he said. Della said carefully, "or cost you the company." Nora laughed softly. "There it is. Fear always sounds wise to people who have never had to lead." Brandt's face tightened. "Mother," but he did not defend Della. He only warned Nora to be less obvious. Nora touched his arm. "I only mean this is the kind of circle you should have married into. People who understand scale, people who bring solutions, people who do not stand in doorways pretending caution is wisdom." The room went quiet. Della looked at Brandt. This was his chance. One sentence would have been enough. One simple, "Do not speak about my wife that way." Instead, he looked down at the papers. "Mother means well," he muttered. A memory rose in Della so suddenly she almost lost her breath. On their engagement night, Brandt had stood beneath a string of cheap garden lights, nervous and sweet, holding a ring he could barely afford. He had looked her in the eyes and said, "I know my mother can be difficult, but I will never let her make you feel small." Back then, Della believed him. Now he sat close to another woman while his mother made Della smaller by the minute. Grant slid one page closer. "This bridge loan would not interfere with a future sale. It only protects you while bigger decisions are made." Della looked at the clause again. "It gives your company approval rights over asset transfers, vendor negotiations, and any change of control if Vale misses the first repayment date. Grant's pleasant expression cooled by 1 degree. That is standard lender protection. It is lender control disguised as protection. Brant exhaled sharply. Enough. Della turned to him. Have Marion reviewed this? Marion Kells, Vale and Sons, outside corporate attorney, had already warned the board that emergency financing could poison the acquisition process if the wrong covenants were attached. Brant knew that. He simply hated being reminded. Nora said, Marion works for the company. Grant is offering help to the family. That difference is exactly why counsel should review it, Della said. Maries leaned across the table and pointed to one clause in Grant's proposal. Her hand rested lightly on Brant's folder. Then her fingers brushed his, not by accident, not quickly enough. Della saw it. Brant saw it too. He did not move his hand away. Maries continued speaking, her voice smooth. Some risks are necessary when a man wants to protect his legacy. Della heard the hidden meaning clearly. Maries was not only talking about the company, she was talking about Brant. After the lunch, Della stood near the hallway and watched Brant walk Maries to her car. Nora stayed by the window, watching them like a woman admiring her own plan. Maries said something Della could not hear. Brant laughed. It was the first real laugh Della had heard from him in weeks. That hurt more than the touch. That evening, Della sat alone in Brant's study, staring at their wedding photo on his desk. His smile in the picture looked honest. Hers looked safe. Her phone was in her hand. She called Elias. Begin the investigation into Venbridge Holdings, she said. Elias was quiet for a moment. Do you think this is business misconduct or personal? Della looked at the photo, then at the empty doorway where Brant used to pause just to smile at her. I think it is becoming both. Later that night, the house was dark when Della passed Brant's study. His door was almost closed. His voice came through the crack, low and careful. No, Maries, he said. She doesn't suspect anything. Della froze. Then Brant added, Mother is right, I have waited too long. Della stepped back into the hallway. For the first time in her marriage, she did not knock. She listened. The glass slipped from Della's hand and shattered across the marble floor. Everyone in the library turned. Brant stood near the fireplace with Maries pressed too close to him, her fingers still resting on his tie. Her lipstick was fresh, but his mouth was not. Nora stood beside them with one hand on the mantel, watching like a judge who had already chosen the sentence. For one terrible second, nobody spoke. Then Maries smiled. She did not step away from Brant. She did not pretend shame. She let Della see the truth with her own eyes. Della had arrived late to the Vale family estate because she had spent the afternoon with Elias, reviewing the quiet acquisition that was supposed to save Vale and Sons. She had entered through the side hall, expecting another cold family dinner. Instead, she had heard laughter from the library, then Brant's voice. This feels wrong. For a heartbeat, Della had hoped there was still a piece of her husband left inside him. But Nora had answered before he could save himself. What is wrong, Nora said, is wasting your life with a woman who brings nothing to your future. Then Maries moved closer and whispered, I am not asking you to be cruel, Brant, I am asking you to be brave. After that, she kissed him, and Brant did not stop her. Now Della stood in the doorway, staring at the man she had protected, loved, and secretly tried to rescue from ruin. Nora broke the silence first. Well, she said calmly, maybe this saves us a long conversation. Behind Della, Sima Bell, 55, the Vale family housekeeper who had worked in the estate since Brant was a teenager, stopped in the hallway with a tray in her hands. Her face fell when she saw the broken glass. She had seen many things in that house, but even she looked wounded by this. Brant stepped forward. Della, wait. Della lifted one hand. No, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it stopped him. Let me understand this clearly. She looked at Maries. You were invited here as an investor. Then she looked at Nora. You brought her here as a replacement. Finally, she looked at Brant. And you let both happen? Brant's face burned red. For a moment, he looked ashamed. Then, like a weak man reaching for armor, he chose anger. Maries understands what my family needs, he said. Della's chest tightened. And what does your family need? Nora answered for him. A wife with weight. A wife with wealth. A wife who can stand beside him in rooms you do not belong in. The words were cold and clean. They were not spoken in anger. That made them worse. Nora had practiced this. She had built this moment piece by piece until even betrayal sounded like a business plan. Grant stood near the drinks table, silent but watching. He did not look surprised. That told Della enough. This was not just romance. This was strategy. Then Nora reached to a side table and picked up a sealed folder. Della saw the white pages inside before Nora opened it. Divorce papers, not a conversation, not a confession, a prepared exit. The air left her lungs. They had not only betrayed her, they had prepared for her pain. Brant looked down. Della, this is not only about us. The company needs stability. Maris and her family can help secure the future after the buyout. Della looked at him carefully. You are divorcing me to marry her? Brant did not answer quickly enough. Nora did. Yes. Maris tilted her head, almost gentle. It is better to accept truth early. Brant finally looked at Della. Mother is right. I need to stop pretending love is enough. That was the sentence that broke something deeper than trust. For a moment, Della was not in the library anymore. She was years in the past, outside Vale & Sons after Brant's father's funeral. Rain had soaked his suit. He had cried against her shoulder like a lost boy and whispered, "If I ever become the kind of man who chooses the company over people, pull me back." She had tried. She had stayed through late nights, unpaid bills, Nora's insults and Brant's pride. She had protected workers he forgot to ask about. She had hidden her own power because she wanted his love to be real. But now she understood. He had not been pulled away from her. He had walked away. Nora opened the folder and placed it on the table. Callum has prepared the first agreement. The formal signing is tomorrow morning. Brant wants this clean. Della looked at the papers. Her name was printed beside his. The marriage she had fought for had already been reduced to margins, clauses, and signature lines. Maris placed her diamond bracelet on the table. The stones flashed under the library light. You should leave with dignity, Maris said. Brant is choosing his future. Della looked at Brant. Did you ever love me, or did you only love how easy I made your life? Brant looked away. That was his answer. No one noticed how steady Della's hands had become. She did not sign, not there. Not while Nora watched like a queen and Maris smiled like a bride. Della only picked up the folder. She did not scream. She did not beg. She did not plead for a place in a room where they had already removed her chair. She turned and walked out. Brant did not follow. Maris watched from the window. Nora closed the curtain. Rain struck Della's face as she reached her car. Inside, she locked the door and called Elias. Her voice shook once, only once. He served me divorce papers in front of her, she said. Elias went silent. Then he asked, do you want me to pause the acquisition? Della looked back at the glowing windows of the estate where her marriage had just been buried, while everyone inside pretended it was progress. No, she said, move forward. As originally planned. Della's eyes hardened. No, now we protect the workers first. Then we remove every person who put them at risk. And somewhere inside that house, the people who thought Della had nothing were still smiling. Do not let him see your hand yet. Elias' warning hit Della harder than the rain still drying on her coat. He sat in his office before sunrise, the same coat wrapped around her shoulders, the same shoes still stained from the wet driveway of the Vale estate. Her eyes were tired, but they were no longer lost. Something inside her had gone quiet after the library, not dead, not cold, focused. Across the desk, Elias placed 3 folders in front of her. The first read Divorce Protection. The second read Heartbridge Acquisition. The third read Ven Bridge Investigation. Della looked at the folders, then at him. He kissed her in front of his mother. Elias did not soften the truth. Then he has made this easier legally, but harder emotionally. Della swallowed. Nora already had divorce papers ready. That means they planned it before last night, Elias said. And that means we do not react like wounded people. We respond like prepared people. Della stared at the folder with Brant's name on it. Only hours ago, she had still been his wife in her own heart. Now she was sitting with an attorney, learning how to protect herself from the man she had protected for years. Elias tapped the first folder. The divorce must be clean. Let Brant believe you have little. Let him believe you are walking away small. He already signed a premarital waiver separating trust-held assets, but if he learns too early that you control Heartbridge, he may delay the divorce, challenge disclosures, sabotage the acquisition process, or warn Ven Bridge. Della's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. He signed that waiver without reading it carefully. He signed it because Nora told him your father's old trust was probably sentimental, not serious, Elias said. That arrogance now protects you. Della looked down. It hurt that even this protection had been built from his dismissal of her. So I let him think I am small, only until the paperwork tells the truth. The sentence settled between them like a promise. The office door opened, and Orrin Hale entered carrying a black file. His face told Della the news was bad before he spoke. I started the first sweep on Ven Bridge, Orrin said. This is not their first rescue story. He opened the file and laid out reports from other family businesses. Same pattern, a company struggled. Ven Bridge offered fast money. A personal connection appeared. Then came asset sales, layoffs, broken contracts, and empty buildings. Della turned one page after another. Grief began to change shape. How many workers lost jobs? She asked. Oren's voice lowered. Hundreds. Della looked away. For a moment she saw Tessa on the factory floor smiling because her son had gotten an interview. She saw Lowell standing beside the failing press, trying to hold together a company that its own heir barely understood. She saw 200 families depending on paychecks Brandt was gambling with because he wanted to feel powerful. This was no longer only about betrayal. It was about stopping a knife before it reached innocent people. A memory rose in her mind. She was young again, standing in her father's office after a deal had gone wrong. She had wanted him to punish the men who lied to him. Warren Ray had looked at her and said, "Revenge is when you want someone to hurt. Consequence is when you stop them from hurting others." Now she understood. Della closed the report. "I do not want chaos. I want records. I want proof. I want every legal line clean." Elias nodded. "Then we build the case before we build the stage." Later that morning, Della went to Vale and Sons, not as the betrayed wife, not as the secret buyer, just as the woman everyone still thought had no power. She met Lowell in the parking lot, away from the security cameras and office windows. "Brandt ordered staff to prepare restructuring files," Lowell said. "He says it is for after the buyout, but I know what layoffs smell like." Della's face tightened. "Do not steal anything. Do not copy anything you are not allowed to access. Just preserve legitimate records. Do not delete warnings. Do not let anyone bury safety reports, payroll notices, or board memos." Lowell studied her. "You sound like you already know what is coming. I know enough to ask you to protect the truth." Across the building, Brandt stood in his office with Nora and Maris. He looked pale but excited, like a man who had traded guilt for ambition. Nora adjusted his collar. "Once Della signs, marry Maris quickly. The public likes confidence." Maris smiled. "We should announce the engagement after the acquisition meeting, not before. First we let the board see stability, then we give them a picture of your future." Brandt hesitated. "That may look cruel." Nora's eyes hardened. "Do not look backward. Women like Della survive by making men pity them." Maris touched his arm. "You are choosing your future." Brandt looked out over the factory floor, not knowing the woman he had dismissed was already protecting it from him. That night, Della sat alone at her desk with the divorce papers in front of her. Her wedding ring lay beside the folders. Her phone rang. It was Oren. "I found something," he said. Della sat straighter. "Maris Venn is not liquid wealthy. The Venn image is built on leveraged assets, pledged real estate, and borrowed social credit. They need access to Vale and Sons, contracts and equipment more than Vale needs their money." Della looked at Brandt's name on the divorce packet. "So Brandt is leaving me for money she does not actually have?" Oren paused. "It is worse," he said. "She may be using him to get close to yours." Della looked at the acquisition folder. For the first time since the library, she almost laughed, not because it was funny. Because Brandt had thrown away the woman saving him for a woman trying to harvest what he did not know his wife owned. "Why is she here?" Della's voice was calm, but the question struck the legal conference room like a slammed door. Maris sat beside Brandt with one smooth hand resting near his arm, wearing a soft smile and a diamond bracelet that flashed each time she moved. Nora sat on Brandt's other side in a white dress, looking less like a mother at a divorce signing and more like a woman attending a celebration. Brandt did not answer. That was answer enough. Across the polished table, Callum Price, 46, Brandt's divorce attorney and the man hired to make the separation look clean, cleared his throat. His expensive pen hovered over the agreement as if he could force dignity into the room by pretending not to see the cruelty inside it. Della sat beside Elias. She had arrived with no drama, no tears, no begging. Her coat was simple, her hair was pinned back, her wedding ring was still on her finger, but only because she had not yet decided where to leave it. Maris leaned forward and placed her bracelet on the table like a trophy. "No hard feelings," she said softly. "Some women are chapters, some are legacies." Della looked at the bracelet once, then she looked away. That small silence bothered Maris more than anger would have. Callum pushed the papers toward Della. "The agreement is straightforward. Mr. Vale is willing to let you keep your personal vehicle, your individual accounts, and a modest settlement. He does not want this to be ugly." Della looked at Brandt. "Then why bring the woman you cheated with?" The room went still. Even Callum stopped moving. Brandt's face darkened. "Do not make this dramatic." Della's eyes stayed on him. "Drama is betrayal asking for silence." Nora gave a sharp breath, but Elias did not move. He had warned Della before they entered. Let them think they were winning. Let them believe she had nothing. Let Brandt sign before the board meeting. Let the law close one door before truth opened the next, because Heartbridge Capital was not marital property. It was protected through the Warren Ray Family Trust. It had been funded before Brandt married her. It operated under Della's maiden legal structure, Della Ray, not under the Vale household. And years earlier, when Brandt had been too proud to care about what Nora called old Ray paperwork, he had signed a premarital agreement confirming that trust-held assets would remain separate. He had thought he was protecting the Vale name from Della. Now that same document protected Della from him, but Brandt did not know the size of what he had waived. He looked at the agreement like he was being generous. That almost hurt more than the cheating. Della remembered a night early in their marriage when Rain had trapped them inside a tiny rented office near the factory. Brandt had complained about wealthy families who bought respect and called it honor. "At least with us," he had said, holding her hand, "everything is real." That was the night Della had almost told him the truth about Heartbridge. She had almost told him her father had left her more than memories. She had almost told him she could help him in ways he could not imagine, but she had seen pride in his eyes and fear beneath it. So she stayed quiet, hoping love would be safer without money standing between them. Now she understood the painful truth. Brandt had not loved being real. He had loved believing she was smaller than him. Nora leaned closer, her perfume sharp and cold. "You should be grateful, Della. You are leaving with more than you brought." Della turned to her slowly. "You have never known what I brought." For the first time, Nora's smile twitched. Brandt looked annoyed. "Can we finish this?" Elias slid a page toward Della and pointed once. His voice was low. "This confirms separation of personal, premarital and trust-held assets. Once signed, neither side can later claim surprise unless fraud is proven. Their disclosures are attached. Ours are legally sufficient." Della nodded. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the pen, not because she was afraid, because she was signing away the last piece of the man she had tried to save. She signed. Brandt signed quickly after her, almost with relief. Callum notarized the separation agreement and asset waiver. The divorce itself would still need court approval, but Brandt behaved as though the marriage had already been buried. To him, the hard part was over. To Della, the truth had only begun to move. Maurice smiled like a bride who had just watched the aisle clear. Nora rested back in her chair, satisfied. Then Elia's phone lit up on the table. A message from Oren appeared across the screen. "Confirmed. Venbridge attempted improper influence before acquisition approval. Evidence package ready." Elias turned the phone slightly. Della read it. Her trembling stopped. Callum gathered the papers, unaware that the real agreement had just shifted somewhere far above his reach. As everyone stood, Brandt followed Della into the hallway. For a moment, without Nora beside him and Maurice watching from behind the glass, he looked almost human. "You will be okay, right?" he asked. Della looked at the man she once loved. "I was okay before you knew me, Brandt," she said. "You just never asked why." She walked away. Behind her, Maurice laughed softly, but Elias stepped beside Della near the elevator and said, "The board meeting is in 48 hours. The independent committee will open the ownership disclosure first, then the conflict review." Della did not look back. "Then give them 48 hours to feel safe," she said. And behind the conference room door, they were still smiling, not knowing the papers they had just signed had freed the wrong woman. They were not trying to save Vale and Sons. Oren's voice cut through the private conference room like a blade. Della stood at the end of the long glass table inside Heartbridge Capital, staring at the evidence board spread across the wall. For the first time, the full shape of her real world was visible. No gold statues, no loud luxury, no useless display of power, just clean glass walls, quiet lights. Framed factory blueprints, and one old photograph of Warren Ray shaking hands with workers outside a plant he had saved years ago. This was Della's world, controlled, private, built on work, not noise. Elias stood beside her with a legal pad in his hand. Oren had files open across the table. Each file connected one person to another, Grant to Nora, Nora to Brandt, Brandt to Maurice, Maurice back to Grant. It was no longer just betrayal, it was a web. Oren pointed to the first row of documents. "Venbridge has done this before. They target weak family companies, offer fast financing, then pressure leadership into selling valuable assets before the owners understand what they gave away." Della looked at the page. "How many companies?" "6 confirmed," Oren said. "3 more suspected." Elias added, "And every time the same pattern, debt panic, a friendly investor, personal influence, then forced restructuring." Della's eyes moved to a printed email between Grant and Nora. Her stomach tightened. Nora had given Grant internal debt numbers before the investor lunch. Not rumors, not harmless comments, specific amounts, dates, supplier pressure, payroll risk. Della touched the page with 2 fingers. She leaked this, Elias nodded. The email came from documents preserved by Vale's company counsel after Marion Kells began the conflict review. We are not using stolen material. This is part of the official board packet now. That mattered to Della. She did not want a trap built from illegal shortcuts. She wanted the truth strong enough to stand in daylight. For a moment she did not speak. Nora had not only pushed Brandt toward Mari's, she had opened the company door to the very people circling it. Oren placed another document on the table. Mari's began contacting Brandt 2 days after this email. At first, business messages, then private messages. Then meetings outside the official schedule. Della looked away. She could handle numbers. She could handle legal terms. She could even handle betrayal when it had shape and proof. But seeing the timeline hurt in a different way. It showed that while she was quietly trying to save Brandt's company, another woman had been quietly learning how to take her place. Elias studied her face. Do you need a moment? Della shook her head. No, keep going, Oren continued. Brandt signed a preliminary memorandum showing interest in Ven Bridges' financing package. It does not complete their deal, but it shows he was willing to move forward while hiding a personal conflict. Della looked up. Is Brandt criminally exposed? Elias answered carefully. Not from this alone. We handle this as corporate governance first. Conflict disclosure, breach of fiduciary duty, failure to protect company information, improper outside influence. If the board or auditors find fraud later, that becomes a separate matter. Della was quiet. There had been a time when hearing that would have broken her, a time when she would have imagined Brandt alone, ashamed, and tried to soften the blow before it reached him. But then she remembered the library, Mari's mouth on his, Nora holding divorce papers, Brandt saying love was not enough. Still, Della did not want wild revenge. She did not want prison threats shouted across a room. She did not want chaos that would frighten workers already living paycheck to paycheck. She wanted consequences, clean ones, earned ones. I want him removed from control, she said. I want the workers protected. I want the Ven proposal rejected. I want the board to see every conflict before they vote. Elias nodded. And Nora? Della looked at the emails again. The woman who had called her small had risked hundreds of families for pride. She wanted the Vale name restored, Della said. Let her watch it survive without her. The words were calm, but they carried years of swallowed pain. A memory rose inside her. Years earlier, one of the factory workers had been hurt in a minor accident. Brandt had been at a client lunch and said he would check later. Della had gone instead. She had sat beside the worker's wife until the ambulance left, then stayed until Lowell arrived. Lowell had looked at her that day and said, "You have the heart this place needs." She had never forgotten that. Now across town, Brandt stood in his office with Mari's and Nora, completely unaware that Della was closer to the company than ever. Nora was ordering a photographer for after the board meeting. We should capture the moment, she said. A strong image matters. Mari smiled. Once Brandt is confirmed as the face of the transition, we announce the engagement. People respect men who move decisively. Brandt hesitated. What about Della? Mari's did not even blink. She is already gone. Nora touched Brandt's shoulder. Exactly. Stop dragging yesterday into tomorrow. Brandt looked out over the factory floor, believing the future was finally bending toward him. Back at Hearthbridge, Oren placed one final document in front of Della. It was a private message from Mari's to Grant, obtained through Vale's legal review because Mari's had sent it while discussing company matters from an account later included in Ven Bridges' document production. Della read it once, then again. Once Brandt is secured, Nora will handle the mother angle. The wife is quiet. She will fold. Something in the room seemed to still. Elias asked softly, "What do you want to do now?" Della closed the folder. "She is right about one thing," she said. I was quiet. Elias waited. Della stood, her reflection steady in the glass wall behind her. Now the quiet part ends. And far away, the boardroom lights were already being prepared for people who still thought they were walking into a celebration. The key shook in Della's hand before it entered the lock. For one wild second, she thought someone was watching her from inside the dark house. The front windows looked black. The porch light flickered above her head. The same house where she had once waited for Brandt to come home now felt like a place that had already forgotten her. She opened the door slowly. The smell hit first. Wood polish, cold air, Nora's sharp perfume still trapped in the hallway. Della stepped inside with one empty box in her arms. She had not come to beg. She had not come to fight. She had come for only three things: her father's framed factory blueprint, an old coat from the hall closet, and the small wooden music box Brant gave her in their first year of marriage. Nothing else. Sima appeared from the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on a towel, her eyes filled with sadness the moment she saw Della. "Mrs. Vale," Sima whispered, "I am sorry." Della's throat tightened. For years, that name had sounded like belonging. Now it sounded like a coat that no longer fit. "Please call me Della," she said softly. Sima nodded, but her face broke a little. Della walked through the hallway slowly. Every step pulled a memory from the walls. In the dining room, she remembered Brant laughing while they painted one wall the wrong shade of blue. He had gotten paint on his cheek, and she had kissed it off before Nora arrived and called the color childish. Near the stairs, Della remembered Nora standing with folded arms, criticizing the curtains Della had chosen. Brant had promised later, "I will talk to her." He never did. In the living room, she remembered waiting alone on their anniversary while Brant claimed he was at the factory. She had believed him then. She had wanted to believe him. The house was quiet, but her heart was loud. She went into the study. Brant's desk was still messy. Business papers, old pens, unopened mail. For a moment she saw the man he used to be, tired and hopeful, trying to live up to a father whose shadow never left him. Then she opened the top drawer. Inside were the lunch notes, dozens of them, small folded papers she had written over the years. "You can do this, I believe in you, come home early if you can." Della sat down slowly. He had kept them. That hurt in a way she did not expect. It meant he had known she loved him. Somewhere inside him, he had saved proof of it. But saving the notes was not the same as honoring the woman who wrote them. She touched one note with her fingertips, then closed the drawer. She took her father's framed blueprint from the wall. It showed the first factory Warren Ray had ever bought and saved. In the corner, his handwriting read, "People first, always." Della placed it in the box. Then she found the music box on a shelf. When she opened it, the soft tune filled the study. A memory rose clear and painful. Brant had given it to her after a hard month, back when money felt tight and love felt simple. He had placed it in her hands and said, "When the world gets loud, open this and remember we have our own quiet." Della stared at it, then she closed the lid. She did not put it in the box. That quiet no longer belonged to her. Suddenly, car doors slammed outside. Della froze. Voices entered the front hall. Brant, Nora, Mary's. Della stood, holding the box against her chest. Mary's walked in first, carrying bridal magazine samples and a folder of announcement drafts. Nora followed, pleased and bright. Brant came behind them, loosening his tie. Nora was speaking before she saw Della. "After tomorrow, we can finally announce something respectable." Then all three stopped. Brant's face changed first. Shock, then shame. Mary's recovered faster. Her eyes dropped to the box. "You still have a key?" Della lifted the key from her palm. "Not after tonight." Nora looked at the box. "Taking souvenirs? Only what was mine before I forgot myself here," Della said. Brant flinched, but Mary's slipped her hand into his. It was a small movement, but it landed like a public claim. In the house where Della had once been wife, Mary's stood beside him like she was already taking inventory. "Tomorrow may be difficult for you," Mary's said, seeing Brant move forward. Della looked at her calmly. "Tomorrow will be difficult for many people." Nora laughed, still speaking in riddles. "That is what women do when they have no power." Della turned to Nora. For a long moment she said nothing, then she spoke softly. "You taught your son to look down so often, he never noticed what was above him." Brant's eyes narrowed, disturbed now. For the first time he seemed to sense there was something in Della's calm he did not understand. Della placed the house key on the entry table and walked out. The night air was cold. Before she reached her car, her phone rang. It was Elia's. "All board packets have been delivered," he said. Della stopped beside the driveway. "Including the sealed evidence file?" "Yes, and the ownership disclosure at the top of every folder. The independent directors will see it first." Brant's packet opens only when the chairman calls the meeting to order. Della looked back at the house one last time. "Good," she said. "Let them open it in front of each other." Behind the curtains, three shadows moved in the warm light, still believing tomorrow belonged to them. Brant's victory speech was already in his hand when the boardroom doors opened too early. Every head turned. For 1 second, Brant thought another director had arrived late. Then he saw the charcoal suit, the calm face, and the woman he had left standing in his past. Della walked into the room. The paper in Brant's hand bent under his grip. "What is she doing here?" he snapped. The boardroom had been arranged like a ceremony before she entered. The long table shone under white lights. Fresh folders sat in front of every chair. A photographer waited near the back wall, hired by Nora to capture what she believed would be Brant's rise. Brant sat near the head of the table, wearing the confident expression his mother had trained into him. Maryse sat beside him, dressed in cream, her hair perfect, her smile ready for cameras. Nora sat behind Brant's shoulder, leaning close enough to whisper instructions. Grant sat with a leather folder full of Venn Bridge documents, looking like a man expecting to collect a prize. At the far end, Lowell sat stiffly, uncomfortable in his best jacket. He did not belong to the world of polished tables and legal language, but he belonged to the factory, and that was why the independent committee had asked him to attend as operations witness. Several unfamiliar people had already made Brant uneasy. Harlan Greaves, 68, the chairman of the Vale and Sons board, and an old family friend who had served beside Brant's father, sat at the center with his hands folded. Beside him was Marion Kells, 53, the company attorney responsible for protecting Vale and Sons during the acquisition. Two auditors, Paul Drennan, 45, and Ruth Cowell, 50, sat near the wall with sealed binders and quiet faces. Before Della entered, Brant had leaned toward Harlan and asked, "Why are there so many legal people here?" Harlan had only said, "Final acquisitions require final clarity." Now that sentence felt less like procedure and more like a warning. Nora rose halfway from her chair. "This is a closed meeting." Maryse gave a soft laugh. "Della, this is not the place for personal closure." Della did not answer her. Elias entered behind her and placed his briefcase on the table. Oren followed with a sealed evidence case in one hand. Neither man looked surprised to see Brant's anger. Harlan stood. "Mrs. Vale is here by right," he said. The room went still. Brant's face hardened. "By what right?" Maryse smiled faintly, as if ready to enjoy the answer. "Yes, by what right?" Della looked directly at her. "Ownership." The word landed flat and heavy. No one moved. Then Harlan opened the folder in front of him and read in a formal voice. "Della Ray Vale is the controlling beneficial owner of Heartbridge Capital, the purchasing entity selected by the independent committee to acquire and stabilize Vale and Sons Manufacturing, subject to today's final board approvals." Brant's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Nora gripped the edge of the table. Mary's smile disappeared so completely it looked wiped away. For the first time, the room saw Della clearly, not as Brant's discarded wife, not as the quiet woman Nora had seated near walls, not as the woman Maryse had mocked. She stood in the boardroom like she had always belonged there, because she did. Brant stared at her, and memories began to strike him one after another. Della asking about supplier contracts, Della warning him about the East Press, Della noticing payroll notices before he hid them, Della asking questions he had laughed at. His own voice came back to him, cruel in its carelessness. "It's business, Della. You wouldn't understand." Now every memory felt like a witness. Maryse leaned toward Grant, whispering fast, but Grant did not answer. His eyes were fixed on the folders. He looked less like a rescuer now and more like a man counting exits. Nora found her voice first. "This is absurd. If she owned anything important, Brant would have known." Della finally turned to her. "No, Nora, Brant would have had to ask." That silenced even the air. Elias opened his briefcase and removed a formal ownership disclosure. Marion Kells confirmed it with a nod. "The ownership records are verified," Marion said. "Heartbridge Capital is held through the Warren Ray Family Trust. The trust predates the marriage. The separation agreement signed yesterday confirms that Mr. Vale has no claim over trust-held assets." Brant flinched. The divorce he thought had freed him had also locked him out. Della took the seat reserved for Heartbridge's controlling representative. She did not rush. She did not smile. Her calm was worse than anger because it gave no one anything to fight. She looked at Brant. "Before you thank your new investors, you should know who owns them." The words from the hook finally arrived in the room where they belonged. Brant's face went pale. Della opened the folder in front of her. "Please open your packets." No one touched them at first. Then Lowell opened his. Then Harlan. Then one by one, the others followed. Brant looked down at the first page. At the top was Della's full legal name. Beneath it was the acquisition authority. And beneath that was a sealed section marked Conflict Review, Venbridge Holdings, Nora Vale, Brant Vale, and Maryse Venn. Brant finally found his voice. "You bought my family's company?" Della looked at him across the table, her face calm but her eyes wounded. "No, Brant," she said. "I saved your family's company." Then she opened the second folder. "But first, we need to discuss who almost destroyed it. You almost sold this company to the people trying to hollow it out." Della's words struck the boardroom harder than shouting ever could. Brant sat frozen with the folder open in front of him. His name was printed beside Mari's. Nora's emails were clipped behind Grant's financing proposal. Every secret he thought was private now sat under bright boardroom lights. Mari's face had gone pale, but she still held her chin high, as if pride could erase paper. Grant closed his leather folder slowly. Della did not look angry. That made the room more afraid. She looked like someone who had already cried in private and had come here only to finish the truth. She stood at the head of the table and began with facts. Heartbridge Capital entered acquisition talks months ago, she said. Before the divorce packet, before yesterday's signing, before Venbridge tried to attach itself to this company. The original goal was simple: stabilize Vale & Sons, protect payroll, repair the production line, and stop predatory financing from reaching the workers. Brant whispered, "You never told me." Della looked at him. "You told me I would not understand." The room went silent. Brant's eyes dropped to the folder, and for a moment he saw every old moment differently. Della asking about supplier contracts, Della noticing the East Press, Della warning him not to rush the Venn papers. He had laughed at her concern because it came from his wife, not from a man in a suit. Elias stepped forward with a clean stack of documents. "Point 1, he said. Venbridge Holdings attempted to secure influence over Vale & Sons before final acquisition approval. Orin opened a sealed binder and passed copies to Harlan, Marion, and the auditors. Point 2, Elias continued. Grant Venn received internal financial information from Nora Vale before the official financing lunch. That information was not authorized for outside release." Nora's lips parted. "I was helping my son." Della turned to her. "You gave strangers the weak spots of a company 200 families depend on." Nora had no answer. Elias continued. Point 3. Maurice Venn pursued a personal relationship with Brant Vale while her family company was seeking leverage over Vale & Sons. Point 4. Brant approved preliminary discussions without fully disclosing that relationship conflict to the board. Brant gripped the table. "I did not think," Lowell cut in, voice rough with disgust. "That is the problem, Brant. Your father would not have signed that." The words hit Brant like a sentence. His father's name had always been his shield. Now it became a mirror. Elias turned another page. Point 5. The proposed Venbridge restructuring included asset transfers, department cuts, and job reductions before the acquisition had even closed. Tessa's name was not spoken, but Della thought of her anyway. She thought of every worker who had trusted the Vale name more than the Vale family deserved. Nora suddenly stood. "This is personal revenge," Della faced her calmly. "No," she said. "Personal revenge would have been easy. This is corporate governance." The words were simple, but they ended the argument. Maurice rose next, trying to recover the room. "This is jealousy. She is unstable. She lost her husband, and now she wants to punish everyone who moved on." Della did not respond. Orin did. He placed one printed message on the table and slid it toward Harlan. Harlan read it aloud. "Once Brant is secured, Nora will handle the mother angle. The wife is quiet. She will fold." The room went cold. Maurice reached for Brant's arm. This time, Brant pulled away. For the first time since Della had known her, Maurice looked truly afraid. Grant stood. "This meeting has become hostile. Venbridge will withdraw until—" Marion interrupted him. "Venbridge's proposal is rejected. Further communications related to this acquisition will go through counsel only. Any attempt to interfere with the approved sale process will be documented." Grant sat back down. There was nothing left to perform. Harlan cleared his throat. "The independent committee recommends approval of Heartbridge's acquisition plan, subject to the governance changes listed in the packet." Brant looked up quickly. "Governance changes?" Della opened the final page. "Effective immediately, Brant Vale is suspended from executive leadership pending review of conflict disclosures." Brant's voice cracked. "You cannot." Harlan spoke before Della could. "The board can. And under the acquisition agreement, Heartbridge can require interim management protections before closing." Della continued. "Your voting influence over transition matters is suspended during the review. Nora Vale is removed from any informal advisory role and barred from internal company access. Venbridge Holdings is excluded from acquisition-related negotiations. Grant Venn's proposal is voided. Maurice Venn's involvement will be entered into the corporate record." Maurice looked like the floor had vanished beneath her. Della's voice softened only once. "Lowell Pike will oversee operations during first-stage restructuring, reporting to the transition committee. No workers will be laid off under the first-stage acquisition plan." Lowell lowered his head, overcome. That was when Della remembered Nora in the library, telling her dignity would be the one thing she could still leave with. Now Nora's hands were trembling on the table. Della did not mock her. She only closed the folder. Brant stood slowly, broken in a way that had nothing to do with money yet. Della, he said. Wait, I did not know. She gathered her papers. No, she said. You did not care. Then Mary's turned to Brant, her voice low but sharp enough for the room to hear. You told me she was nothing. And in that moment, Brant understood he had not just lost the company, he had lost both women in the same room. There is no we without the company. Mari said it so sharply that Brant stopped in the hallway like she had slapped him. The boardroom door had barely closed behind them. Inside, Della's folders were still on the table. Outside, the damage was spreading through whispers, footsteps, and stunned faces. Board members moved past Brant without meeting his eyes. The photographer Nora had hired stood useless near the wall, holding a camera that had captured no victory. Brant reached for Mari's. We can fix this. She pulled her arm away. We, she asked, her face cold now. You told me she was nothing. You told me this company was yours. Brant's mouth opened, but no defense came. Mari's gave a bitter laugh. Alignment requires value, Brant. The word cut through him, alignment. That was what she had called love. That was what he had traded his marriage for. Grant was already walking away, phone pressed to his ear, speaking fast to his attorneys. He did not look back at Mari's. He did not look at Brant. The moment the plan failed, loyalty became expensive. Mari's followed him. Brant stood in the hallway alone. A few feet away, Nora sat on a bench, twisting her pearls between her fingers. Her white dress, chosen for celebration, now looked painfully wrong. Workers passed in small groups, whispering. Some looked at her with anger, others with pity. For years, Nora had believed the Veil name made her untouchable. Now she looked like a woman who had handed strangers a key to her own house, then blamed everyone else when the door opened. Brant turned away from her and walked back into the boardroom. Della was standing near Lowell, speaking quietly. Elias was beside her, calm and watchful. The folders were closed now. The war was over, but the room still held the weight of it. The East Press gets repaired first, Della told Lowell. Payroll will be stabilized by Friday. Supplier calls go through the transition office. No worker loses a job during the first stage restructuring. Lowell's eyes shone, but he kept his voice steady. They need to hear that from you, Della nodded. They will. Near the doorway, Tessa covered her mouth when Lowell told her. Her eyes filled with tears. She did not cheer. She simply closed her eyes like someone who had been holding her breath for months and could finally breathe again. That was when Brant understood the worst part. Della had not come only to punish him. She had come to save everyone he had forgotten. He stepped closer. His voice was smaller now. Was any of it real? Della turned. For the first time all day, the mask of calm cracked. Not enough for tears, just enough for him to see the wound under the strength. Yes, she said. That was the tragedy. Brant swallowed. I made a mistake. Della looked at him for a long moment. No, she said. A mistake is forgetting a date. You built a life where everyone had a voice except your wife. Oh, at his eyes. His loss stood around him like empty chairs. He had lost Della. Mari's had left him. His executive title was gone. His family's control was gone. His mother's pride had turned into shame. The workers no longer trusted him. The board no longer respected him. Even his belief that he had been smarter than Della had collapsed in front of witnesses. I'm sorry, he whispered. Della wanted those words once. There had been nights when she would have given anything to hear them. Nights when she sat alone, hoping Brant would walk in, hold her hand, and remember who he used to be. But apology after consequence was not the same as love before betrayal. She reached into her purse and took out her wedding ring. Brant stared at it. She placed it on the boardroom table between them. I loved the man who gave me this, she said. I do not know the man who made me prove my worth in front of strangers. Brant's face broke, but she did not pick the ring back up. That part of her life was finished. Della walked out of the boardroom. The factory floor was visible through the long glass windows. Workers had gathered below, waiting, uncertain. When Della stepped onto the upper walkway, Lowell nodded to her. Tessa mouthed, thank you. Della did not smile widely. She simply breathed. For the first time in years, she was not carrying Brant's pride, Nora's insults, or Mari's shadow. She was carrying only herself. As the factory doors opened, the machines began to run again. Della remembered her father's voice from long ago. Never fall in love with a name on a building, fall in love with how people are treated inside it. She looked at Veil and Sons Manufacturing one last time. The name on the building no longer belonged to the people who abused it. It belonged to the workers who kept it alive. Behind the boardroom glass, Brant watched the woman he thought was small become the woman who saved everything he lost. Della stepped into the morning light and did not look back. Not because she hated him. Because tomorrow, For the first time, no one else would decide who she was. And if you believe loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness, comment justice, and subscribe for more stories where quiet strength finally gets the last word.